Hi everyone. In this video I am going to go over how to compute S39 from your homework. You're going to calculate a predetermined overhead rate and you're going to analyze year-end results. Okay, so let's look at the problem. Here's the problem. Adam Industries manufactures wooden backyard playground equipment. Adam estimated $1,800,000 of manufacturing overhead and $2 million of direct labor costs for the year. Those are estimates. After the year was over, the accounting records indicated that the company had actually incurred $1,660,000 of manufacturing overhead and $2,650,000 of direct labor cost. Those numbers are actual numbers. Okay, so remember that when you're doing predetermined overhead rate. So number one, okay, you're going to calculate the predetermined overhead rate. Okay, so predetermined overhead rate, remember, an estimate, apples to apples, only estimates in your numbers. So your estimate of overhead, $1,800,000. That's overhead. Okay? All right. I go back. Number one, it's telling you, assuming that the company uses direct labor cost as their allocation base. Okay, so the direct labor cost estimate, very careful, is $2 million. Don't use actual in the predetermined overhead rate. Direct labor cost. You divide it out, okay? And then you get 0.90, convert that to a percent, that equals 90%, okay? All right, then requirement number two. Here's what it's saying to do. How much manufacturing overhead would have been allocated to the manufacturing jobs during the year? Okay, now one piece of this we will need actual. So I go back to the problem. The allocation base again was direct labor cost. The actual direct labor cost was $2,650,000. Okay, so I go back and I'm going to figure out my estimate for overhead. I take $2,650,000, which is my actual direct labor cost, and I multiply that by 90%. And that equals $2,385,000. That is my estimate for overhead, my allocation of overhead for the year. All right, let me draw a line now. Here's what it's saying. Requirement 3. At year end, was manufacturing overhead overallocated or underallocated, and by how much? Okay, this is also known as overapplied or underapplied. So different textbooks call it different names, but your textbook calls it overallocated or underallocated. All right, so what you're going to do for 3 is you're going to do a T account. Everyone remembers a T account looks just like a T, all right? Debit is always on the left. Credit is always on the right, okay? The top of your T account is manufacturing overhead. You've heard me refer to it a lot as just overhead. You can do that as well, especially if you're working in your notebook, no problem. The lab will probably make you do a drop-down window. All right, here's what I want you to get. The debit is the actual, okay? The credit is your allocation, all right? Sorry, I'm putting in the numbers, getting ahead. That's the allocation, allocated. They don't call it this, But to make your life easier, call this an estimate. That's your estimate. So then you know which side of the T account to put it on. The debit sides will be the actual, the credit side will be the allocation. All right, so I go back to the problem. I figured out my estimate or my allocated amount of $2,385,000. We figured that out. You're going to figure that out when you work in the lab, okay? That will not be given to you, and we went through how to do that. Now I go back to the problem, and what I'm trying to find is the actual amount of overhead. All right, so what do they say? All right, after the year was over, the accounting records indicated that the company had actually incurred $1,660,000. So the actual is $660,000. Okay, we'll just eye it. You estimated $2,385,000, right? The actual was $1,660,000. Take the difference between the two, right? Just so you know, it's going to end up being on this side that you'll have to make the entry. You'll end up having to debit. But I'll show it the same as the publisher, $725,000. And what that means is you've over allocated. You've allocated too much. So your answer is over allocated by $725,000. Okay? And that's it. Now later on we'll see what we do with that, but I've learned to just piece by piece, we're going to get there. You'll see the way that we'll have to make a journal entry, but not yet. All I want you to get for this week is when it's underallocated or overallocated. Okay? And that's it. All right, so I'll see you soon.